Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tea Time with our Teacup Entrepreneurs. I'm Steph Pellish, your hostess here at Teacup Entrepreneurs, and I'm so excited to introduce Cindy Mummer today of Mums Math Tutoring. And Cindy was a teacher in the classroom for about 25 years, where she taught middle school, high school, and college. She loves all things math, but really her goal is to create meaningful math opportunities for all students to help them learn in the most practical, functional ways. And now she does full-time tutoring in the Pennsylvania area in person and is available all over the United States to do virtual sessions as well. And she is one of our newest members here in Teacup. And so I am so excited to introduce Cindy to you all today and to dive in all about numbers and math today. So welcome, Cindy.
Thank you so much, Chef. I'm happy to be talking with you today.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here today too. We're just going to dive into, have you always been good at math? Have you always loved math?
I think so. I like the patterns and relationships, and I'm thinking back to high school. My junior year math teacher connected me with a math tutoring program in the high school. So during study halls, I would go and be available for other students who wanted math help. So I think it probably started back in 11th grade as far as the tutoring part.
That's fantastic. So right away, one of your teachers saw that you had a strength and offered you that opportunity to put it to good work.
Yes, yes.
All
And
right.
still friends with her today. She actually, it's funny, my first year of teaching was as a long-term substitute in the Downingtown School District. I was in for someone on maternity leave, and that teacher was my mentor that year. So it was kind of a full circle kind of thing. It
Oh,
was,
so she really was a pivotal part
yes,
of your career.
she was definitely.
And what grades did you start teaching in?
So at that time, Downingtown had one high school and it was grades 10 through 12. So I had a little bit of everything that year. I had a lot of general math, some algebra, and then what was it called? A survey of math course where it was for seniors, and we went out and we were using surveying equipment, which was something I had to learn all about. So that was a hit the ground running kind of moment, but it was fun to do that.
Yeah, I love that you try to make math meaningful. I'll just say I am pretty good at math when it comes to the foundational math, like this whole new, it's not really that new anymore, but like Common Core math, like that's how my brain learns. I would have loved it. It's how I already did math anyway. So when my kids come home and they're like, I need help with this, and other parents are like, I have no idea. I'm like, no, this is great. This is exactly how I do it. Like I round and then I figure it out, or I like break it apart so that I can then do the thing. So I was always able to make it practical for myself until we added letters and graphs and all these new components. And so when I was in high school, my mom, my mom, who was a science teacher and actually taught me algebra, so she was a science and math teacher, she got me a tutor and it was horrible. It was a horrible experience. And he was a very nice guy, but just like missed the mark on connecting with me. And I didn't understand. And so I felt like I was getting more frustrated because I didn't understand what he was trying to help me with. And then because it wasn't a good fit, my mom stopped having him come, but then I never got any other support. And so I wish there was someone like you that would have been around to help me to figure out how to make it practical, but also how to understand that. And so I'd love to know, like, when you have a kid, a student who's just not getting it, how do you help them to get it? If that's the right question.
Yeah, at first, it's important to give the student time to talk about how they think. So I'll ask them to like walk me through your thought process, and often I'll choose something that they got correct, so I can kind of see how they're approaching things.
Mhm.
Um, I'm going to reveal my age here a little bit and say that, the more math has gone to online, the less engaged students have been in certain ways. So it often means taking it back to paper and pencil or a whiteboard. It could be a digital whiteboard, but writing it out and making contact with the concepts. So, and I think what you were talking about with the Common Core, that whole movement was designed to really develop number sense.
Mhm.
And so we have the Common Core number sense approach, and then we have the memorize an algorithm and just do it over and over approach. So, and I think
Yeah,
a lot
memorization was never my strength.
Yes, and students are kind of like navigating both of those things because, the Common Core and the everyday math was happening, up through maybe sixth, seventh grade. And when I started seeing them at the high school, we didn't have to break down how do you multiply or divide or whatever, but they were still using those processes that they had learned. So I think making math visual is super important, relating it to something that they're interested in, whether it's sports, or I always find if we make it about food or money, it's get dialed in a lot faster. And it depends on the age, but if usually if we make it about food or money, they're more interested. So I'd like to get to know, the students at the beginning. I want to know, you know, and it's hard to ask some of these questions at the beginning because students are coming to me in some cases to address something that they're struggling with, and maybe it's a vulnerability and they don't know me,
Mhm.
before a couple sessions, and so they're revealing kind of their a weakness, and that can be a really challenging. And so I always, talk with students about that directly, like, thank you for sharing this with me, or thank you for showing me what works for you and what doesn't. And I say to them at the very beginning, I'm going to offer a handful of suggestions here and strategies. And the best way for us to do something is the way that works for you. And we're going to keep working until we figure out what that is. So I have a lot of ideas in reserve, but I also learned from students. Like this summer, I was working with a middle school student on her math packet, and we were multiplying and dividing decimals, and she was struggling with where to put the decimal place. So we were moving the decimal, and she called them scoops. Like, I'm going to go 3 scoops. I'm like, I love that. And so
Right?
so I used it, and other people like, that works great, I'm going to remember it. So coming up with sometimes a wacky or funny way to remember things really works, because if it's the rote math way, with all the mathy terminology, you know is it correct? Yes. Is it meaningful? Maybe not.
Right,
So
and if you're not getting it,
yeah.
then you're not gonna get it the next time or the next time, and I think it's great what you just said too, because I don't think I realized at the time, and now looking back, I had so much shame in not knowing how to do this math because I was always a good math student. And so when I then physics really I struggled with. And so and calculus, once I got to those and I couldn't do them as easily, or with calculus, our tests always obviously got progressively harder. I would get the first two right every time. I would get my homework right most of the time. But then once I got past the second question on a test, I could not apply the rest for the rest of the problems. And I had so much shame around that. And instead of getting me help, I, there was a curve in class, or they just kind of pushed me through, or it was talked about getting me support. And so my grades really struggled in an area where I thought that I should be doing better, but had no real support to do that. And so I love that you right away acknowledge that it's a weakness, because at however old I was, 16, 17, 18 years old, I don't have any weaknesses.
It's an area of and also, and especially like I'm working with a student who is a pretty elite baseball player. And I said, well, if we go out to the baseball field and you try to teach me how to hit, I mean, it's going to be comical. I said, I don't. So, and I was working with an experienced rower, and I actually have a rowing machine in my basement. So I was asking him some things, and we talked a lot about it because they would row on the Schuylkill, which is near where I live. And I said, "Yeah, teach me something. Talk to me about how you learn something." And so he was explaining like a basic process, and I said, I bet you don't even think about that anymore. You've done it so many times. It's just a habit that you just do it, you know? And so that's a strength for you because you put in the time and learned that foundation and then you built on it. And you know, math, most things are like that. You know, we most of us can't jump in at the elite level. We got to, work up and not everybody has to be at the elite level. And I think
Absolutely.
that's one of the reasons why I left the classroom where, I think sometimes in schools, and there's a lot of great things happening in schools, a lot of great teachers, students, programs, and I'm not disparaging that, but I think I was hearing over and over again that from students and parents and seeing it on my own that, students are being valued for how they can do on a test or what level they can achieve or, you know, um, there was too much equating a student's worth with their ability to perform in math or whatever. And so I think, going back to your example, if you ask for help and the tutor is just saying the same thing over and over again, or just saying it louder, you know, if
Yes.
that was the solution, you would have been there, right?
Right. If I understood it, you wouldn't be here.
Right. And so I think sometimes in schools, when you've got a class of 30, sometimes more, it was getting more and more obvious to me that I kind of knew how to help each individual student. But when you put diverse students of, varying abilities in the same classroom, I know that there are kids that are frustrated because they're lost. There are kids that are frustrated because they want to move faster.
Mhm.
And so I was doing, scaffolding things in there, but it wasn't enough to keep everybody moving forward and giving them what they needed. And I was turning myself inside out to try to meet all those needs. And it got to a point where I thought, okay, I need to step away and find another way to work with students.
Yeah. And so that's what made you take the leap from the classroom into tutoring.
Yes,
And
yes, and I
so,
did a little tutoring while I was teaching, but
okay.
after I left teaching, yeah, I was really getting into tutoring on a more full-time basis.
And have you always done only math? I know that you also have a degree in English, but have you always tutored math? Have you done a little bit of both?
I I worked for a tutoring company for quite a while, learned a lot. So I was trained to tutor all areas of SAT and ACT. So that included the English. It was a good review of grammar because I was using a all my entire adult life, even though I have a minor in English. And then I learned how to teach the science section and the reading sections. And to be honest, a lot of that is about strategy.
Mhm.
Um, and so it was a good education for me, and I enjoyed it. But now I'm focusing on math, and I do some SAT, ACT math, just the math part tutoring. I don't take on the whole test anymore, but I do tutor the math sections.
Yes, so I'd love to talk about the transition to become an entrepreneur because there's a lot of math that needs to happen as an entrepreneur. And I know many of our teacup entrepreneurs, but I know many entrepreneurs who shy away from the numbers because they can seem so overwhelming or they don't match what, when we go into entrepreneurship and you see, oh, we'll make millions. I feel like this comes up a lot. Like, oh, I'm gonna start a business and make all this money. And then that's not quite how it goes. And so I'm wondering what your journey was as an entrepreneur with the numbers, if it was maybe a little easier for you, a little challenging. How was it?
So I think it's different because I'm in kind of a service business. And yes, I have
Mhm.
technology and I have textbooks and I have a lot of resources and different sites that I, have memberships in that I pay for. Um, I'm a business of one. Having taught in schools for 25 years, I don't want to hire people and manage people. I did that for 25 years. I'm just trying
Sure.
to manage myself right now. That's so it's been so I formed my LLC actually a year ago in August this
Oh,
month. So
congratulations, the 1 year anniversary. That's awesome.
um and then so then I think the learning curve was pretty steep, how to form an LLC, which I did on LegalZoom, but now I have a small business attorney that I work with. How to, market, how to create avenues to meet students and parents. All of the things that go on behind the scenes in terms of invoicing and all the legal things and all of the accounting pieces. I'm excited to. I just connected with an amazing accountant, Kelly Harris at Teacup, and she is my new accountant. So um,
So you're outsourcing your numbers as well.
yes. So yeah. So I mean, um, I still do the day to day. I mean, she'll be doing my business and personal taxes for me. And
Mhm.
right off the bat, she was super helpful and answered a couple key questions for me that my prior accountant would not answer. So yeah. So I think it's about making connections, getting involved with your great organization has been so helpful. And I've only been a member for about 2 months here, but the amount of information that's shared, excuse me, and the ideas that I've generated from hearing other women talk about what they're doing, what has worked, what hasn't worked, and just trying things. And I think being an entrepreneur, there's going to be ups and downs. It's like teaching. Sometimes this method
Mhm.
works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah,
It's
that's very true.
it's not a situation where, oh, I have the answer. I'm never going to have to explore that question again. Oh yeah, you will.
That really resonates with me when you said that, because it's like being in a classroom where one size doesn't fit all. And that's the same thing for entrepreneurship, right? Even if we had the exact same business, what's going to work for me might not work for you. What's working for you might not work for me. And yeah, there's a lot of parallels right there.
Yeah, I have, I tutor a lot of algebra and geometry, and in fact, I tutored a brother sister duo this summer, and they were learning some of the same things. And in when we were learning factoring, I was showing uh, the one student one way to do it, and the other student who was very quick with numerical patterns. I'm like, well, here's the quicker way to do it because your mind works this way. You don't have to do it the other way. So
Yeah.
it was kind of interesting for me to see that. And those are the things that were a little tougher to do in the classroom,
Mhm.
to individualize it. So I like the freedom to really make it very tailored to what each student needs. And I'm finding more and more that I'm going to say about 50% of the challenges that students are having are not about math concepts. Um, it's
Tell me
about
more about that.
it's about understanding how you learn. It's about taking ownership of your role as a student. These are the tough conversations. It's about, like you were talking about, your calculus test. You could get the first two and then it got tough from there. I think in math, many students think, hey, I got the homework done, I did pretty well, I'm ready to go. Um, that works for some students and it works for many students to a point, but they hit the place, whether it's calculus or geometry or algebra 2 or wherever that is, where those old methods don't work.
Yes.
It can be a tough awakening. So I talk with parents and students a lot about, we need to simulate the test experience at home, because if the first time you're working without your notes is on the test, that could be too late. We need to
Mhm.
know, do I really understand this well? So we'll pick, and sometimes I'll create a test for them, 2 or 3 questions from each topic, put everything away, sit down, and let's see how it's going. And that gives us feedback around, hey, I know that these 5 things, I need to review these 2 things. It also gives them a bit more confidence going into a test situation because they've done that. The other piece is, and again, this could be showing my age a little bit, but I think so much information is so quickly delivered to students via technology and other resources that um, and I think their brains are wired differently than I was.
Absolutely.
They're working.
Absolutely.
These students have not lived outside the age of cell phones and laptops and all of that. So um, they don't have to hold on to information the same way or to the same extent. So when they then have to go and sit in front of a test, they don't have access to those resources. It can be a little bit difficult if their brain is not pulling forward that information. So
Yeah.
I really work with students to either annotate their notes or annotate their examples, or, again, a little old school. I like the 5x8 note card, or students can create a Google Doc of like, what is the top 5 ideas from this unit? And let's have an annotated example for each one so that um, the act of making those summaries gets it into their brain differently. And I also tell students, you're not doing this for yourself right now. You're doing it for yourself a month from now when you need to have a big test on this, or
Right.
6 months from now when there's a final, or next school year when you're in algebra 2 and you need to go back and look at this algebra 1 concept. I want something that is ready to go in language that is meaningful to you, that you don't have to be digging around everywhere.
Yeah,
So
and it sounds like you're really looking at the whole student. You're looking comprehensively at what's going on in their brain, how are they putting it together, how are they going to retain it, how are they going to apply it, and also how are they going to retain it in the most functional way. And I know in our house, my husband's an accountant, so he's a numbers person, and I'm a numbers person, but I don't use it in my everyday. But we talk a lot about how with our children who are in middle school and now high school, how much they're actually going to need to retain this information. And they still need to have that foundational understanding of how these things all work. But at the same time, when you can just Google the answer, or you can say, hey, Alexa, give me the answer to this math problem, do how much do they really need to understand it? And it goes to, it depends on what they want to do with their lives
right.
going forward. And there will be pieces that they're going to need going forward, and there are going to be pieces that they don't need forward. I will never need to know what the angle of a telephone pole is and the shadow so that I can measure how high the telephone pole is.
Right.
That's what I would, that's what my, I'm telling you, when my tutor came, he was tutoring me in math and physics. And we went outside to like measure a telephone pole and measure the shadow and I was like, this is stupid. Like, I have no application for this. I don't need to know how big the telephone pole is, right? And so figuring out what are going to be the functional, applicable pieces to it. But, if I sat down and you were like, I know you mentioned a lot of kids learn best when it has to do with food, sports, or money.
Yep. Yep.
We had that conversation previously. And so if you were like, here's how it relates to you in terms of money, okay, now I can learn to apply it. Now I can learn because there's a practical application for me. If you want to talk to my boys about math, just bring up any sports stat, and all of a sudden you've got their attention because, oh, all right, we can figure out the batting average, or we can figure out the shooting percentage, or whatever it might be, because
If,
that's
if you're if
interesting
you
to them.
if you play any sport with the ball, like if you're kicking a soccer ball or shooting a hoop, the path that the ball follows is a parabola, and like what's the sometimes that's a bit of a stretch. Like, well, I don't need to know that exactly, but it puts it in a context. Or I was just thinking, I was teaching slope the other day, and I talked to some students about like, have you ever walked up bleachers that are really steep? Or maybe I remember, and this is going back, I going to a concert at the Spectrum when it was still existed. I think we were in like the hot, maybe the second or third row from the top, and it just got super steep. I
Right.
said, you know, what does that feel like when you're walking up the steps at your house versus the bleachers, or looking at the slant of a roof, or if you're a skier or a snowboarder, how are those ratings for those slopes determined? It's about moguls and things, but also about steepness.
Right.
So, putting it in that context, I'm like, oh, or if a student drives, if you're on the highway, we see these signs that are really for the trucks. Like there's like an 8% grade. It's just telling you how steep it is, and they know how quickly they need to start braking and things. So, I I also love teaching geometry because I tell students, like, look around your room, look out the window. What do you see? You know, and I had my students when I was teaching do a geometry project where we took a geometry field trip. We walked around the neighborhood and in the building, and we're taking like, I need you to find 6 examples of parallel lines and
Right.
examples of regular polygons. And it created the desire to look around their world a bit more. And I think for most of us, we see what we're looking for, but if we aren't looking for something different, you know, we're missing out on a lot of things.
Yeah. So with all of the changes, how do you stay on top of the latest teaching strategies or technology, or what's new and coming, and what the students are using versus what's available to them?
I would say in math right now, especially for students who are doing a lot of work online, preparing for the digital SAT, it's the Desmos calculator graphing app that's available. It's quite similar to the TI 84 graphing calculator that I use, but it has additional features like it will solve systems of equations. Um, and I was just working with an SAT student this summer, and he's like, I'm just putting it into Desmos. He's like, the answer is blah blah blah. I said, well, let's just recognize that you're getting the answer right, but you don't know how to do the process. He's like, I know. So that's
So can you use that calculator in the SATs or the ACTs?
on the digital SAT. It's actually on the screen. Yes,
So it's available to use.
it's
Interesting.
ACT is currently paper and pencil, so you have to bring your own calculator.
Okay.
So yeah, so but then there's like, you know, then I think about students who are taking placement tests. You know, the rules around what level of support they get in terms of technology changes depending on what they're doing. You know, what is allowed in your classroom, what is allowed on a standardized test, what is allowed on the Keystone exam, Algebra 1 Keystone exam in Pennsylvania. You know, you can use a standard calculator. What is allowed on a placement test for your college? You know, the rules are different in each. What is allowed for AP exams? So to me, it's really tough being a student these days because we're on digital SAT. I have this great little calculator app thing that I can use. And for most students who know how to use it, it's because they know what it's doing and you know what they're trying to figure out. Um, I tutored a woman my age in business calculus. She found me all the way from Texas. She found me, and she's in insurance, and she had to take business calculus. It was so crazy. There is I bought the calculator. It's back in my calculator bin. It's a calculator that does calculus, integrals and derivatives and everything. So maybe that would have made calculus.
That would have been a lifesaver for me.
But, but the amount of, I mean, we had to learn the language of how to
Mhm.
enter information into this calculator, which it took me, you know, I had to practice.
Yeah.
And then it would spit out these answers, but on her test, she had to interpret them. So uh, that was an excellent example of there was very little true learning going on there. It was we were learning how to use the calculator because it was one of those cases, as you said, this is the hoop she had to jump through to move forward in her insurance career. Will she ever use that? Probably not. You know, and I agree with you. There are students that I'm working with that, you know, okay, we got to get you through algebra 2 and then you can do what you really want to do. Okay,
Mhm.
that's our target. We're
Right.
going to approach it this way. And then we've got students who are going into a STEM field or engineering or, you know, and we need to be able to function at a pretty high level in calculus or pre-calculus or whatever. That's a different approach. Um, you know, I've worked with statistics and calculus students who there are a ton of formulas in calculus, all the derivative and integral rules. It's hundreds of pieces of information that they have to memorize. Plus, they have to know all the trigonometry relationships and identities to be able to apply them. It's literally hundreds of pieces of information that if you're in an AP calculus, you're not going to be given that. There's no formula sheet. So they're getting mixed messages depending
So
on what they're working with.
what kind of advice would you offer to students who might be struggling, maybe with math, but more around that challenging piece, maybe the anxiety of math?
I Well, I guess I would give parents some advice as
Mhm.
well,
Sure.
um, this was happening when I was still teaching, and I see it continuing in a lot of districts. Most districts want to encourage, push, whatever verb you wanna use, students to take the highest course they can, and that's really great.
I'm laughing because that was my biggest problem, that I got pushed
It
into AP Calc
is,
and had no idea how to do calc.
and I'm actually starting with a calculus student next week, and I looked at the tracking in his school. They have the foundational math track, which starts in like 8th grade, and then all the other ones are college prep. And so there's no step down from that. They don't give students a step down. Like he really struggled in pre-calc, and now this year they're on block scheduling. He's taking calc A, B, and BC, and the only other option is a business calculus course, which won't help him because he wants to go into engineering and it won't be recognized by engineering schools. So he's got to do these two high level AP calc courses
Yeah,
where he doesn't get to experience calculus. There's no like just straight up college prep calculus. I think that has been a concern of mine for a long time, that we're asking students and parents in 8th grade to decide where are you going to be, and depending on how the districts have it set up, they may have some steps up and steps down within the track, but the deeper you get into things, you're kind of locked in.
so how do you support the parents and students through that? Obviously, you're helping them learn the skills and you're offering them new skills and with your tutoring, but in terms of the foundational struggle there,
Yeah,
is
I mean,
there a way to support that?
yeah, I mean, I definitely talk with parents and students about, the reality of the situation, how we got here, and one of the things I ask parents is what has your students' math experience been? What has gone well? What hasn't gone well? What's worked? What hasn't worked? And if a student is struggling, in pre-calculus, there's usually, some indications of that. So that often involves going back to prior concepts and making the summaries and doing extra work. And the message that's often hard to receive for parents and students, more for students, is that, hey, you're gonna have to do more than your homework. You're gonna have to do what you're doing in class, you know, and it's
Yeah,
also about setting reasonable goals and expectations. Would it be great to get a B or an A? Yes. How much time, how much motivation do you have to put into this? What is your ultimate goal? Are you going to be pursuing a math or science career? Is a C okay? And I'm not saying don't work hard, but we need to take all the circumstances into account and recognize what's reasonable, and
absolutely, absolutely.
that's
An A is not always the goal.
mm-mm.
A C to get through this class because it doesn't really have functional practical use going forward and you need to pass and move forward. That might be
Yeah.
good enough.
I mean, and so
Yeah.
I worked with a student briefly this summer who struggled in math. So her school offered summer geometry. So she was going to get geometry out of the way over the summer. But her school had them doing geometry, a full year of geometry in 5 weeks, 5 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
And there,
That's so
there were
stressful.
there were videos, and she had access to online help for maybe an hour a week. And I mean, you should have seen this girl's notes. Pristine. I said, you could market your notes. She's like, yeah, but I don't understand any of it. The rate at which this information was coming, and I understood why, there was no time to digest it. So, it sounded like a viable idea. Yeah, can we just focus on just math and kind of not have to do everything all at once? But the speed with which it would have had to happen, so I think I feel for parents and students trying to figure out what is the best thing to do, what is the best thing for my student, and I think um, it often goes best when the parent and the student have a good relationship, and the student can be truthful versus the
Mhm.
parent saying, "Well, you got to get a B in this class," or whatever. Like, let's look at all the details, all the big picture. all the contributing factors here and be honest about what is the ultimate goal, what is reasonable. And yeah, I mean, if you're white knuckling it, how well are you going to do? You're going to be stressed and nervous.
Right.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
I love that. It sounds like you're really a major advocate for so many of these students, it- for them to show up in the classroom more confidently, but also to support them with conversations of parents to really set realistic expectations. And that's incredible. That's
Yeah,
incredible.
I think it's important. It's very important. And you know, I I, I always kind of cringe when I hear students valuing themselves for how they did on these tests or on a test, or, I'm stupid, or I don't want to ask questions because my friends or everybody in class is getting it more quickly than I am, or,
Yeah.
having to hide in the class because you don't, you feel judged or uncomfortable, or, if you ask the teacher for help, if they just say the same thing again, like,
Right.
you know, that's,
Right.
that's not what we need.
Yeah.
Um,
Or even in that situation too, comparing grades to what your friends are getting or how everyone else is doing. And then you want to hide your effort, which is not helpful for anybody either.
And why, as a student, would you go in every day and work hard if it's not making a difference? I understand why. Yeah, some students, there's different reasons why students aren't motivated. But if you're working hard and your efforts aren't paying off, why would you
What?
continue?
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, we have to find a different way, a way that works for that student. And will they get their A or B? Maybe not, but will they leave the class learning about how they learn and how to tackle adversity.
Yeah.
um, when I first started teaching, it was like, oh, I was so like math focused. Everybody has to learn XYZ in algebra. Yes, yes, that would be great, but most importantly, they need to learn some resilience, learn how to manage things, learn how to create good expectations, reasonable expectations. And that was really a
Yeah.
focus in my
I
last.
think I think that's fantastic that you're really helping them to learn lifelong skills that they can use because we learn throughout our entire lives. As entrepreneurs, we know we're constantly learning these new skills, these new things that we need to put forward, whether it's into our marketing, whether it's into a new strategy or finances. And so I think that's so important in a classroom. As you said, when you've got 30 students, you can only do so much. And when you get into a tutoring situation, when you have that one-on-one support where someone can really walk you through, look at here are where the gaps are, here's how we can bridge those gaps, here's how far the bridge needs to take us. Maybe we need a short amount of time, maybe we need a lot, maybe we just need that C or that A. But I think it's so incredible and so important that you're helping them to gain those lifelong learning strategies. I know that one of the things that you've recently completed is an executive functioning certificate. Is that
Yeah, I'm wrapping that up in the next couple of weeks. I had a parent ask me specifically if I offered executive functioning skills support, and so I talked with her about what I do in math. She wanted it across subjects, and so I'm like, well, technically, a lot of it transfers. So what I'm learning is that these baseline skills around focus, how to initiate tasks, how to um, judge whether you've completed it, creating those expectations and boundaries, and the ability to check in with yourself about what you're doing or not doing. Those are those lifelong lessons. And I just also want to say something that you mentioned a minute ago. If a student is striving for, let's say, a B, I'll often talk to them about, you feel like you're over your head in this class. Let's target 80% of the concepts and master those, so trying to take on the whole thing versus like, and that also I think has to do with executive functioning skills. Where's my area of focus? what makes sense for me.
I love that. I love that because that allows there to be some space to grow, but also some space to, you know what, this just isn't going to be my piece. I don't need to get that 100. I don't need to have perfection. And focusing all of my energy, it's that 80-20 rule, right? Focusing all my energy where that 20%
Mhm.
is not working isn't really going to get me a better grade. Whereas if I put more focus into that 80%, well, maybe now I can get a 90 because my 80% really supported me through.
Mhm.
And I think that's an incredible thing in life in general that I think in tutoring and in school, what we do is we focus on those areas where students are struggling. And we forget that we can also focus on the areas that they're doing well in. And there's research that shows that if you have a math student that learns more math concepts, gets stronger in math, their verbal skills go up because it is all connected. It builds their confidence in not just math, but in other areas. And so I think that's really important for parents too. And I know it sounds like you also are looking at supporting the student who's already in that field and wants to get better, not because it's a weakness for them, but because they understand that that support of getting better in that area will actually help all of those other areas to rise up as well.
Definitely. Yeah. I 100% agree with you. Whatever learning we're engaged in is going to impact so many other areas, even if it's just, creating those additional connections in your brain, keep your brain expanding. And who knows when or where or how you're going to use this. But
Absolutely.
gather more skills,
Even
that
if it's only when your child is in sixth grade and brings their
right.
homework to you and says,
Exactly.
Mom, how do I do this? Well, let me think back 30 years. Okay.
That's when you need those note cards. That's why you're making the note cards.
So I have to save those note cards for 30 years so that I can go back and I'll just call you. No, so actually that's going to take me into my next question. If somebody's looking for support for their child, if somebody's looking for a math tutor, whether it's for their middle school child, high school, college, prep, whatever that might look like, how can they find you?
Well, my website is mumtutorsmath.com, MUM, those are the first three letters of my last name. And I'm Mum Tutors Math on Facebook and Instagram. But a good place to start is on my website, and they can find a lot of details about what I offer, my experience, as well as my contact information.
Awesome. And you're still providing in-person and virtual sessions?
I am doing both, yes.
And if you can just briefly kind of tell us, what does a session usually entail? Is it the same length of time for everyone? Is it the same duration, or do you have different, more individual?
So yeah, I offer a variety of things, and it kind of goes back to, the best way to do it is what works for the student. So I have some students that I meet for an hour a week, some that I meet for a half hour a week. I have a couple that I meet for 2 half-hour sessions a week. I have other students who I work with on an as needed basis. If they hit a topic that's more challenging, or they might just want to review for a test. I would say, 80% of my students, we do have a kind of a weekly schedule. So it's usually, Mondays at 4, Sundays at 3.
Mhm.
But I know that student schedules shift a little bit, so I'm flexible as much as I can be. But yeah, I have lots of ways to work with students around their schedules and their needs.
I love that. And I'm so excited that you found Teacup and that you've joined us here. And I look forward to continuing to connect with you and seeing how more connections inside of Teacup help your business to grow and what collaborations perhaps come from it. But I appreciate you being here today. And we will also add the places to find you in our show notes. And thank you for becoming a member of Teacup, and thank you for being here today with us.
Thank you so much, Steph. I really appreciate the community that you have created and your time today.
Thank you.